everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host, with Brittany and Beatrice still on the truck. We're waiting to drop our last load, and then it'll be home time. I had an appointment at 1700. It is now, what time is it? It's like 1845. I'll be shocked if I get in there by 2000, because there were probably 30 trucks here already when I got here, and they just keep coming. And even when I walked my paperwork down, there was like 90 doors, but like 6 of them that didn't already have trailers just dropped in them. So be here a while. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about something that's going on kind of in the news and kind of affects the traveling public. So there are likely to be shortages or actual absence of gasoline at lots of gas stations in different parts of the country. And I'm kind of here not to explain to truckers necessarily, but to explain to people that don't know anything or don't know much about the trucking industry. So it's not really a supply problem. Like, there's not an issue getting crude oil to refineries, and it's not a refinery problem that there's not going to be gas at gas stations, because the refineries are refining plenty of, or distilling actually, plenty of the summer blend gasoline and putting it in their storage tanks. The problem is getting it from the storage facilities to the resellers, who then let people pump it into their tanks. Unless you're in Jersey, in which case other people pump it into your tank. So a lot of people, and the reason for all this problem, and this is even part of the reason that there was the shortages or outages, if you will, when the Colonial Pipeline was hacked, is that there aren't enough guys or gals that drive gasoline tanker trucks. Now, you could say, well, why, aren't truck drivers just truck drivers, just truck drivers, just truck drivers? Aren't they all the same? And the answer is no. Yeah, there are a lot of common basics, but each segment of the industry has its own kind of procedures, rules, whether they're written, codified rules, or whether they're just like, this is how you do things safely, this is how you do things, etc. And that doesn't even count company policies. But let me stop for a second and go back and do the little history lesson. In the 1930s, when the U.S. was in the throes of the Great Depression, there were a lot of layoffs, a lot of furloughs, in, just a lot of unemployment in cross industries. And that includes the railroad industry. Now, even though the railroads weren't handling as much cargo and as many passengers as they had been during the 20s, they still were really important. But railroads, they're for-profit entities, so they had laid a lot of people off. Well, younger workers were happy to just have the idea that they would eventually get a pension, right? Because all the railroads paid pensions. But older workers wanted, sorry, I'm sitting on my wallet, it's hurting me, because I have a George Costanza wallet. But older workers wanted current protections, meaning they wanted a paycheck then. They didn't care so much about a pension. So, labor unions that represented railroad workers went to the federal government and said, hey, you guys there's a tension here. We have all these members, but we want to try to make it right for everybody. So what came out of that was the Railroad Retirement Act. And the Railroad Railroad Retirement Act actually preceded the Social Security Act, even though they kind of knew they were going to do the Social Security Act. But it set up a separate system for railroad workers. And if you know the history of U.S. railroads, railroads have always been treated differently. And so it wasn't unusual that their workers were treated differently. And in fact, my wife's grandfather was a railroad worker, and he didn't get drafted or called up for World War II, even though he was eligible, because he worked for the railroad in Southern California. And eventually he did join the Navy, but it was after like a lot of his peers who didn't work for the railroad had already been called up or been drafted or whatever you want to say, joined the military. And so, you know, there's always been something special about railroads and railroad workers. My dad was a railroad guy, and you know, part of what makes the railroad an attractive career is that railroad retirement. It's outside the Social Security system. I mean, there are a lot of parallels, and there are some overlaps, but it's managed by the Railroad Retirement Board, which is an independent organization based in Chicago. It's not even in Washington, D.C. And so, you know, we don't in this country have trouble moving stuff by rail because we don't have enough railroad workers. And the reason is because for decades and decades, they've been identified as being essential. And when I say essential to the operation of the nation. So what if we got to the point where we said, and by the way, we've been at this point for a long time, truck drivers, all truck drivers, but certainly some truck drivers are absolutely essential to the operation of the United States. Like our economy, our economic security, our national security. Like, can you imagine if you called 911 in the next month and you're like, hey, my neighbor's house is on fire, and they're like, gee, you know, we would love to send an engine company, a truck company, a rescue company, and a whole bunch of firefighters, but it turns out we don't have fuel for our apparatus. Sorry. Or, hey, there's a bank robbery. You know what? Let me see if I got a patrol car that still has fuel that can respond. I mean, and I'm not exaggerating, because you know, it's not like the local police department has like a pipeline into the back of the precinct from, you know, some oil refinery, right? They get fuel the same way everybody else does. It comes in a tank truck. So, getting back to those drivers. Well, you know, the news media has talked about, well, these qualified drivers. Well, you know, first of all, in order to drive a gasoline tanker, you need a few things, right? You need a physical, DOT physical. You need a commercial driver's license, Class A. You need a tanker endorsement, and you need a hazmat endorsement. Now, lots of drivers have all four of those things. They have a good physical, a CDL, a tanker endorsement, and a hazmat endorsement, okay? But driving around frozen chicken or driving around pallets of copier paper is way less dangerous, way less stressful, way less complicated than driving around like 30,000 gallons of highly volatile liquid on America's highways, okay? I haven't driven 30,000 gallons of highly volatile liquid around America, but I've done the other two things. And I can tell you that the guys that are doing what you need them to do so you have gasoline to go to the beach, to go to the shore, to go to the mountains, whatever you're doing, they don't get paid more than I do, given the same level of experience. And I'm talking about when I was a company driver. I see what they're offering these guys. I see what these tanker companies are offering drivers. And it's not that much money. It's not that, and it certainly isn't like, you know, significantly more than what you could make driving a dry van. Because every shipper wants their commodities to get to their customers. And so the part of the industry that handles consumer fuel, right, had experienced a downturn when the pandemic happened, right? Kind of like the railroad workers did when the Depression happened. And a lot of people retired. A lot of the older drivers retired. And then a lot of the other drivers, they were like, yeah, they don't need any gas. We don't have any work for you. Because if you don't drive, you don't make any money. A lot of those guys went elsewhere. Because guess what people were buying? They were buying food. They sure as hell were trying to buy toilet paper, packaging, materials, you name it. Anything that was consumer, that a consumer would use at home. I mean, my old company hauled for Clorox, the company I was with when the pandemic first started. Man, we were like assholes and elbows trying to get Clorox loads taken care of. Although Clorox is also like Kingsford briquettes, and I hauled, I hauled Kingsford briquettes a few times. But my point is that, like, companies that made, like I hauled out of 3M. 3M makes all sorts of, hospital supplies. I hauled from 3M to like Cardinal Health right outside of New York City. I mean, that was like high sweat load, And so, but, if you were out driving then, traffic was great because people were staying home. They didn't need gasoline. So a lot of these guys left that sector, and now they're like, why go back? Right? I'm making a lot of money because trucker pay has gone up across the board, right? I don't care what they're doing, whether they're local, regional, OTR, dedicated, LTL, it doesn't matter what they're doing, they're probably making money at it. And so, you say, well, why aren't there enough guys to haul this fuel? Well, because there is no compelling reason to do that work in today's environment, right? They're not protected people, but they're vital. And they're even more vital than somebody like me that's got a load of food behind me. Why? Because you don't need to eat exactly what's in my trailer, right? You could have an apple. You could have a hamburger. You could have some frozen green beans or a can of baked beans. I don't have any of that in my trailer. I just have chicken. I think I got chicken. I got chicken. So if you're like, oh, I don't eat chicken anyway, then my load isn't really that important to you. But there's nobody, your vehicle in America, unless you're driving a Tesla or a couple other like a Volt or a Leaf, your vehicle uses one of two kinds of fuel. Distillate gasoline or diesel. Those are the only two kinds. And the vast majority of passenger vehicles are still gasoline. Vast majority of SUVs, gasoline. Pickup trucks, probably maybe half and half. I don't know. But you get my point. What if people get angry enough and realize, we're starting to realize that cyber protection is vital to our economic security. It's not just for a company to worry about its own. We have to, as a nation, worry about all of our companies, right? If we want to keep the economy going. Well, what if, but truckers really aren't unionized, right? We're all we work for companies, but there's not a strong union presence like there was with the railroads. But what if the average citizen reached out to their congressperson, their senator, and said, look, for company drivers at least, we need to guarantee something for them. We need to keep them on the job. Even when things taper off, we still got to figure out how to pay them something so that they'll come back, right? And you know, this idea that, oh, well, that's just welfare. Well, you call it what you want, but in my previous profession, you know what we called it? We called it a retainer, right? People used to pay me, lots of people actually, would pay me every single month, right? Some would be 50 bucks, some 75, some 100. They would pay me just for the right to call me up and ask me a question, or just for the right for me to handle something for them at a discounted rate. What if we said to these drivers, hey, look, you haul fuel. You're an important special person, right? And maybe this expands to other segments of the trucking industry, but you're an important special person, and without you, the economy shuts down, right? People don't drive to work. They don't go on vacation. They can't go shop. We need gasoline. We need fuel at the consumer level, right? What if we said to them, hey, look, under this, and by the way, I'm advocating for another government program right here. You know, maybe it's called the Fuel Drivers Retirement Act or whatever. And we say to them, hey, look, when you're working for ABC Fuel Distribution Company and you're working, you know, your normal hours and stuff, we're going to, you know, you're just going to get paid, right? Although we think you should be paid extra. We think your wages should be higher. But if you get furloughed, if you get laid off because the economy slows, we still want you there when the economy comes back. So what we're going to do for you is, in addition to giving you any state unemployment benefits, we're going to give you an extra $1,000 a month, right? To keep you happy, to keep you interested in coming back to this. Now, you could say, well, that's going to add up. And you're right, it is going to add up. It's a retainer, right? Now, if they don't come back or they take another job, then they have to pay the money back. And the government's good at recouping money too. But what I'm saying is, you know, maybe there's something to the notion that truck drivers, like railroad workers, are so vital to our nation's economic and other security that we need to set up a system that keeps them in the industry, makes that, because I know guys that get furloughed on the railroad. You know what they do when they get furloughed? I know some guys. They just drive a truck. They have CDLs also. Like I knew a guy at night who he would get furloughed from Burlington Northern and BNSF, and when he got furloughed from the railroad, he would just drive a truck. And then once the railroad called him back, he would just tell Knight, hey, this is my last load. And he would go back to working on the railroad. Why? Because there's something at the end of that rainbow, right? There's that railroad retirement, and that's a big incentive. So what if as a country, if we want gas at all the pumps, right, including the ones in New Jersey, what if we said, hey, let's start recognizing that truck drivers are more than just important. They're vital, right? Like I said, there are certain commodities that you could do without, or you could choose something else. There are suitable substitutes. There are zeros. If you have a gas engine car, there are zero suitable substitutes for gas to fuel that vehicle. Zero. Okay? Unless you buy a different kind of car with a different power plant. But until that happens, you have to have that particular commodity. Maybe we need to protect the people that bring that commodity to the consumer. And like I said, maybe we need to protect people even in other sectors of the trucking industry. I don't know about a guy that's carrying chicken. But like I said, I think you can make the case for the gas man. So anyway, be safe out there. I've been asked by a subscriber to do like a tutorial on using the Rand McNally Motor Carriers Atlas, and so I've said I'm going to do that. I'll do it probably while I'm on home time. So anyway, hope that'll be interesting. I've always been enamored with maps and atlases and stuff, and so hopefully that'll be helpful to people, you know, even who've never used an atlas. And I think this person hasn't ever really used an atlas. It's not a skill that's taught widely anymore. So anyway, take care. If I don't see you, you know, have a safe and happy 4th of July. Don't blow any fingers off with fireworks or other pyrotechnics, and you know, be safe out there. Talk to you soon. Bye.